Hello and welcome to Halftime here on SportyTV. My name is Victor Godfrey and we are live here at the home of the champions, Manchester City. This is the Etihad Stadium and we are going to be talking to one of their very own, Nedum Onuoha. As you know, this show is powered by SportyBet, the official African betting partners of the champions, Manchester City. So come, let's go meet Nedum. All right, we have Nedum Onuoha with us here in the studios, and it's good to have you here.
Good to be here, sir. Very good to be here.
I was going to ask you if you still have a bit of a hangover as the partying stopped. Are we still in that mood?
No. I was part of the celebrations, but not to the same extent as we've seen some of the players that you have seen. But I think the celebrations around this will probably go on for a lifetime. Because even this summer, there were people who played in '99 for Man United who were still getting a chance to talk about that. So I'm sure for myself and other people who support Man City, this is the type of thing which you will talk about for the rest of your life. So even though you don't party every day, you can still remember that feeling you had when it happened.
Now, Nedum, some experts say that the journey to the treble for City started with the goal, last second goal, Aguero against QPR. Question now is, where were you on that particular day?
Where was I?
And what was the atmosphere like when that goal went in?
So I would have loved to have been on the field wearing the Man City blue, but I was wearing the hoops of Queen's Park Rangers. I just left City halfway through that season. And then as the stars were aligning, I'm playing against him in that final game of the season. And for us at QPR, we needed to stay in the Premiership. And at the time, we needed a positive result and we'd stay up. So it was a weird feeling to go and play against the team you supported for the first time, to play against people who you're really close with, to go to the stadium you used to call home. I'd never really had that experience playing against City. So to play in what was their biggest game in the Premier League history for them was surreal. And yeah, Aguero did obviously go and do something quite significant. And when it went in, everyone knows about that feeling from a City perspective about how they celebrated, how they won, everything was great. But for me personally, I thought that goal was the one which had just sent us down to the Championship. So I was distraught for about 10 seconds. But then as I looked around the stadium and I saw our bench for QPR and I saw the fans for Queen's Park Rangers as well in the stands, everybody was celebrating. It went from being one of the lowest points of my career to then being one of the highest, because I know we achieved what we wanted to achieve. And then I could step out and think about it from the perspective of all those been on that journey for Man City. And yeah, they won their first Premier League title.
So now, Nedum, City are treble winners, European champions.
Could you say that again?
City are European champions and treble winners. Would you say that the mood is such that it's a weight lifted, or is there a hunger for more success?
I think it depends who you ask. I think for some of those players that have been there along this journey, then it is a case of weight lifted. The people who've been there for 5, 6, 7 years that really understand the way it is to play for Man City, the way it is to have the expectations put upon you because it is City. And the ones who, lost the final 2 years prior, this is the first Champions League title for a lot of those players. And when they know the significance of the journey to get there, like Haaland says himself, they brought him in to try and achieve what they hadn't achieved before. So yeah, the weight has been lifted, but for him, the weight is just that little bit less because he hadn't had to experience it for 5, 6 years. So I think there is a case of weight lifted, but, after they've celebrated it, the season starts again. And these players, they don't enjoy losing. So if you don't enjoy losing, you tend to enjoy winning. So what do you have to do to win? You have to knuckle down, you have to be ready. And now they're in a position where they've got 3 titles to defend. And they're not going to try and give those up too easily. And I think the motivation obviously might be a bit different now because they have won the first, but their understanding of what it takes to win all 3 is definitely there. I wouldn't necessarily back them to do it again because, this is the second one I've seen in my lifetime in England. But I'm sure once their break is over and they arrive back on the field and it's time for pre-season, they might have a few different badges on their shoulders, but the motivation for success is there.
Okay, now, Nedum, let's just travel back in time to a few months back, right?
Yeah.
Premier League title was decided. Were you confident that City was going to get the treble?
Was I confident? Absolutely not. No, I was not confident. I think, and maybe you agree with this. So I think there are different ways that you can watch football, yeah. There are the people who look at results. There are people who look at highlights, and there are people who watch games, yeah. And those three different perspectives dictate how you think things will go. If you've watched the games, you know that every time a team wins, it's never an easy win. There's always a moment where you feel uncomfortable, whether it's for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a whole half, a whole game.
Even if they're as dominant as City?
City dominate the ball. They don't always dominate every game that they play in for its entirety. There's some of those games where for those players as well, they leave the field and know they've had to work hard for that game. They have to work hard for the success that they've had. And I think if you see how hard they have to work to get to that point, then you know the dangers of going to play against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. Like before Kevin De Bruyne scored to make it 1-1, City were on the back foot massively in that game. But they managed to get the result, the 1-1, and they know how much that means going into that second leg. So I wasn't confident. One game, one bad half stops everything. And that type of situation isn't unlikely when you're playing 60 plus games in a season. You look back at the year before, Liverpool were in theory in a chance of winning 4 trophies, and they finished the season with 2. It's tough. If it was easy, we would have seen it happen more often regardless of how good a team is. So I wasn't confident, but I knew that going into the game against United, they would be favourites. And the thing I'm confident about is that if City play to their best, then they're always in with a very good chance of winning. But as the games then get closer, like you play against Man United in the FA Cup final, you don't want to be playing a derby game in a final against a side that knows that if they stop you, not only do they win 2 titles, but they also stop you from winning a treble. You know how big that game is. So those players are motivated to a whole different level. And the differences between the sides, it's never really as big as people perceive it to be from the outside, especially in a one-off game where everything's on the line. A la City losing to Wigan in the FA Cup final.
But that was a long time ago. That was way before.
Listen, why do you watch football because you know what's going to happen, or do you watch football because something might happen which you don't expect?
The latter.
There you go. So if you think something might happen which you don't expect, then that's why you tune in. That's why if City win a treble, but for 90% of the season they weren't top. They were not top of the Premiership. City in the Champions League run that they went on. In fact, for that last year, there was a spell where people were saying something's not right at City. Haaland isn't getting enough touches. Haaland is signed for the wrong club. Cancelo's leaving. These are the wheels falling off. Well, that's the journey to get to the point that they arrived at. So there is more to the story than people will sort of remember should they decide to disregard how someone got to where they got to. So I wasn't confident. But after the second one happened, I was relieved because it was against Man United. And then it's the Champions League final. I'd love to fall back on positive memories and say, oh yeah, I've seen them win the Champions League final before, but I hadn't. And the last time I saw that was against Chelsea. It was one of the worst games they played in that whole season. So there's nervousness because you know how much it means. And there are 2 stories for City, I think. There's them winning the treble and there's them winning their first Champions League. And with that sort of pressure and, you know, potential to be either the best day or the worst day ever, you know, you can't be confident. You just have to be hopeful.
Well, we all know what happened.
It ended pretty well, you could say. Ended pretty well, yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you. You're pretty close to the current set of players right now in City. Do you have a favorite character?
I think it depends which person I want to be. I think in terms of my personality, I really like Rodri. Even though I've seen him a few times, spoken to him. What a nice, humble guy and what a great player. Just loves his football, keeps it simple. But then there's also someone like a Kevin De Bruyne. Again, he's the most chilled out man on planet Earth, but what an incredible footballer he is. And then there's my connection to someone like a Phil Foden who, you know, came through the academy as a fan of the football club and he's playing for the football club. And even now, listen, Phil Foden's here. I'm somewhere else. We both have similar experiences because we know what it means to put on that shirt to play for the team. So in terms of my favourite, it just depends. They're so good. They're so good at football. But upon looking at things like Ilkay Gundogan's story in the Players' Tribune, I think, the way he describes the football club and the characters within it, show why anybody within that group is somebody who you can get behind. Because it shows that they're united together. They literally enjoy spending time with each other, and you have to be in that position because there are times when you spend more time with them than you do with your own family. So I think in terms of all those characters, listen, any one of them, because they're such cool guys, to be honest.
And let's talk about the man behind, or the brains behind Manchester City in terms of their football. That's Pep Guardiola. Where would you rank him in the hierarchy of great managers?
Great managers in England or great managers
overall? But I would even dare to say, okay, well, we can't add a national team story here. But we can just say club managers,
Because, and anyway, with national team football, it's different.
It's different.
You're going to be dictated by the talent that exists within your country and the football culture. Like, in the Netherlands, they want to play 4-3-3. You know, you could have a manager that might want to play 2 at the back, but you're not going to be received well if you play 2 at the back. But what I would say, and having Guardiola is one of my favorite managers of all time, but he was before he came to City. When he was at Barcelona, I thought he was exceptional. I think the way that Barcelona side played against Manchester United, I think in those 2 Champions League finals, I'm pretty sure he was manager.
Yes, he was.
That was some of the best football that I'd ever seen. And then he went to Bayern Munich and he redesigned how they played as well. And then upon coming to City, I feel like every single year they've played well, but it's been different. The first manager to get 100 points in the Premier League, you know, he'd won 5 out of 7 league titles or whatever it is. And I think one of the biggest shows of success that a manager has is the players that arrive at the club. They arrive one way and they leave another, and they tend to leave better. So he coaches them to a point whereby they play the best football of their career. And that is a hallmark of a really good coach and manager. And the players, like, they know it's ultra competitive. They know they're not probably going to play as many games as they would like to, but the success is right there. And that character has been built. And even though they've had some incredible players across the years, this last 7 years or however long it is at City will be spoken about as the Guardiola era, as opposed to the era of certain players. And I don't think many managers have that. Sir Alex Ferguson had that, and a few other I've had that as well. But, you know, he's had the money, he's bought the players, but he's made them better. He's changed the football club, he's changed the identity, he's changed the mentality within the space, from the staff to the fans to the Football League in general. And now you could go down to a field down the road and see people trying to play out from the back. You saw Guardiola's team do it with inverted fullbacks and stuff like that. So I think he's my favourite. You can never really quantify who's the best because every situation is different. But he's without a doubt my favourite.
Of all time? Or
my favourite of all time.
Yeah.
When you think about the significance of Sir Alex Ferguson, the reason why he's a Sir, the reason why United were as dominant as they were, and you can see the change they had based on how he came at the start, as opposed to how he walked away, and how the club's never really fully recovered from him not being there. But I wouldn't be surprised if years down the road, you know, the seat that he leaves Guardiola is one which is going to be one of the toughest seats to fill in world football, because of the fact that not only did he have success, but it's the way in which he did it and the way that team played, to where globally now they're perceived in a different manner to how they would have been, because not many people now talk about, say, when Pellegrini won something or when Mancini won something, even though they were successful. The way Guardiola's done it has brought more eyes and brought more attention to the football club.
So basically, he's number one on your list.
He's my favourite. And interestingly, when I was at City 2003-04, he actually came on trial for City. So I played with him for a week as well.
Pep Guardiola?
Guardiola did, yeah. He wasn't the Pep, but he was there. I think he ended up going to play in the Middle East afterwards. But yeah, he was under Stuart Pearson. Yeah, so that's my link to Guardiola as well.
Interesting story. Okay, now let's say you are now in the position of Guardiola, right?
Yeah.
You're the manager, and you're going to pick up your dream team, for instance, right?
Okay.
And but for some incredible reason, you only have one slot left.
Yeah.
And we have 2 players on the sidelines.
Okay.
Erling Haaland or Kevin De Bruyne. Which would you pick out of these 2, and give us the reason why?
If you want like a really sensible answer or like the general answer.
Nedum, come on now.
Okay.
Give us the Nedum answer.
Okay. So I would love to play with a player that's going to score 50 goals every season. I would love that. You know, that speaks for itself. But if I put myself in the position of being on the field with him, listen, I'm not going to give him 10 assists. I'm going to say that for a fact. So maybe it wouldn't be 50. So, and like Erling's, he's young, he's 22, he's 23 years of age, and he's driven. He's like a special level of professional to where he strives to be the best. Wouldn't be surprised if at some point in his career he's in contention for the Ballon d'Or, maybe even this year. But I think he's the final piece. I think Kevin De Bruyne is a bigger piece within the puzzle. So I think sensibly, I would choose him, because I think Kevin can have a bigger impact across more players, whereas Erling is the final piece when you want to just take everything over the edge. So I hope that's a respectable answer.
So
Kevin De Bruyne.
There we go. We're waiting for the final
De Bruyne,
pick.
yeah.
Oh wow! So you just dropped the player who scored.
I didn't drop him.
You just dropped him.
You said he started on the bench anyway. I didn't drop him. He was there. You know what I did? I promoted one and left the other. Did not drop anybody.
Now talking about the player you dropped, Erling Haaland. There were many question marks start of the season, especially that performance against Liverpool.
Yeah.
Community Shield.
Yeah.
Now, based on that in your mind and how social media just went crazy,
Yeah.
Did you expect him to have the impact he's had so far?
I expected him to have an impact, but I remember the feel and the conversation after that game against Liverpool in the Community Shield, talking about like overreactions, this is no good, there's no this, there's no that. But it was different to see City playing with, firstly, a new player, but then a new player that plays as a central striker and has that size and everything like that. So I could see why it might not necessarily work straight away. But then also, because I covered City in that pre-season, they were a week behind Liverpool in their preparations. They'd played fewer games. I think that might have been their third pre-season game. Well, not, sorry, the Community Shield is not a pre-season game. That was their third game in that season. So they weren't as sharp as, say, Liverpool were, who'd played a few more and were basically ready to go. So that was a closer version to Liverpool's final product than it was City's. And yeah, when he has that tap in and he hits the crossbar or goes over the bar, it's like, then Nunes comes on, he's so fast as this. And because both came in at the same time, there's the comparison. It's going to be Liverpool, City, looking this. A week later, one's got 2 goals. Haaland scores 2 goals away at West Ham. That's, 50 goals later. It seems like it was somewhat of an overreaction, but I get it. You have to talk about what you see. But I think there's a lot to be said for just trying to be sensible. And I think a lot of people in that moment weren't sensible just because they hadn't seen Haaland play before. They might have seen a YouTube highlight, but they've never seen a 90 minutes worth of him. And he knows how good he could have been, and the club know how good he could have been. And it was just a matter of time before he found it, and he definitely did find that for sure.
Well, so you're impressed with his impact for City this season?
Excellent. 52 goals kind of speaks for itself. I think it's 52. I keep saying 52. I'm pretty sure it's 52. And I think about times when clubs that I've played for haven't scored 52 goals in the entire season. So I think if one man can do it, then it's not too bad for a 22-year-old, is it?
Okay, now let's talk about your playing days. You were one of the brightest young talents in English football, especially with your run with the under 21 national team. Fantastic tournament, by the way. Let's just say, for some reason, time and the stars aligned to a period whereby Pep was the manager of City, and you were just coming up the ranks. Where do you think you'll fit in with your style of play, and how we notice how he uses, his defenders? You mentioned inverted fullbacks.
Yeah.
You have John Stone playing in almost like a Beckenbauer position nowadays. How would you, fit in?
I think there was a point within recent times of football where people being recruited and they would have a list of priorities. And for defenders, the first priority wasn't defending. It'd be, can you play a diagonal ball? Can you play a ball through the lines? And then defending would be like 4th or 5th most important thing to a club that's trying to recruit someone. But I think Guardiola has sort of raised that priority level again. And there are times when he'll play with 4 centre-backs who all really defend well and take pride in it, and that isn't that common. So I think from a defensive standpoint, defending was something that I enjoy doing, and one-on-one defending is something which I tended to thrive in, whether it's because I was strong, physical, could read the game pretty well. It's not to say that I was good enough to do it, but those messages and what he wants are easier things to take on board. And it suited more of my game than, say, other times when I first started playing, you never really played the ball back to the goalkeeper unless he was going to kick it long.
Yeah.
You never really put your foot on the ball and you could wait for someone to draw to you because you didn't have the same options. I think generationally football's changed, and if you were at the back, more often than not, if you had the ball at your feet, all you could see were numbers of your teammates because all they're trying to get you to do is to go long. That wasn't for everyone, but I think he simplifies the game to the point where you know exactly what you need to do. And the thing that you need to do is stuff which you can work on, but it's not the most complex thing in the world. And you need to be there to defend. You need to know the structure. You need to be aggressive. And if you gave me those messages, I think I could have placed it in the back for him for sure.
Sure.
I don't know if I would have been good enough, but you see the way he says, he wants his defenders, especially when they defend with 3 at the back, be aggressive. So go tight with the attacker. That's fine. Cover, that's fine. Try and win your headers, that's fine. One-on-one defending in terms of other areas, don't dive in. That's fine. I never used to dive in. So I'm not saying I'm as good as these guys because I'm not. But those fundamentals of defending, things which suit how I saw the game. So as a consequence, if someone asks me to do it, I'm not going to be panicking in the same way they might say, right, get the ball here. And I want you to play a ball between these 2 midfielders through to the number 9 who's on this side.
Okay.
Because then that's a different situation because I was more risk averse in terms of how I wanted it to play. So the way he gets these players to play now, like the people that take more risks are further up the field, and the ones at the back, they know they're well supported. They can play the ball to Edison, they can play the ball to Rodri, play the ball to Stones, or play the ball around with each other. And as long as you put them in the right positions, as I say, you might make 60 passes in the game, but most of them are probably this distance. So I can live with that.
No, that seems fair. So perhaps in an alternate universe, you would have won the treble with City.
In an alternate universe, I would have won the treble every year with City. But things don't necessarily work the way that we want sometimes. Yeah.
Let's talk about a player that surprised you the most this season. Anyone?
Haaland scoring that many goals is a big surprise. If you think about all the players that have been in that league for 30 years, in the Premier League, that's a lot of real quality strikers, and they've never managed to do what he's done. Even in times when Man City scored 100 goals in the league, they still didn't have somebody that broke that record. So for him to do that is very impressive, especially at the age of 22 that he was at the time. The moment when I really had to stand up and realize what was when Man City beat Manchester United 6-3. The two centre-backs were Manuel Akanji and Nathan Ake. And on the bench, they had Laporte and Ruben Diaz. And in my mind, I thought that Akanji and Ake were going to be supporting Diaz and Laporte in terms of just general games. But here was the biggest game of the season so far, and those were the two that were selected. And from that point, they were basically selected for every game. And Akanji came in when a couple of players were down, and Ake came in, he seemed like he was going to be support when he was coming from Bournemouth. But lo and behold, those guys played in all the big games between then and the end of the season. So those two, they impressed me with how well they did and how solid they were and how dependable they were, to the point where at one stage, Nathan Ake goes down with a bad hamstring. And you're thinking, what do they do now? What does City do now? And to sort of go around on that point, they put Akanji to left back. I think that just goes to show those two. They stepped up in a way that most people probably never would have anticipated, myself included. But then maybe that's more for me, because you're talking about a full Swiss international and a Dutch international. But yeah, I think those two, they were in the top 5 players this season for Man City. When you think about how significant the season was, not many people would have had those two in that sort of ranking.
Wow.